everybody. Let me be the fifth person to welcome you to Napa, to the Napa Valley Education Exchange. My name is Barbara Nemko. I have the honor of being the County Superintendent of Schools in Napa. So on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, the Napa Valley Unified School District, the County Office of Education, and all the citizens of Napa, we are delighted that you are here for this very exciting conference. So my question to you right now, how many people have heard of Web 2.0? Well, you are going to have the privilege this afternoon of hearing from the person who created the term Web 2.0, among many, many other things. You've heard of the Maker movement. And there he is, the Maker movement. You've heard of Make Magazine. And there he is, the creator. This is going to be a really exciting session because it's all about unleashing your creativity as an educator. The Maker movement, as you know, is about what can I create? What can be different? What will be fun to do? And how many of you watched Dale's TEDx talk in preparation for being here today? Come on, you overachievers, it's okay, raise your hand. Okay, so some of you did see it, and it's great fun. And I love watching things like the creation of the extra tall bike. Well, what do you do with an extra tall bike? I don't know, nothing, but it's fun to make it. And I also enjoyed the fact that Dale says we are all creators. When you cook, you create. When you decorate your house, you create. We do all sorts of creating things, and you're going to learn some things today that will help us to not stifle the creativity in our kids. That's what I love about what Dale talks about. Dale was actually born in Los Angeles and then moved to Louisville, and I guess, I don't know if it was just you or the whole family got smart enough to come back to California. He developed the Global Network Navigator, which was the first commercial website launched in 1993. But you could find that out if you Googled him. What you may not know is he loves to garden and loves to cook. And his great joy, and we bonded on that instantaneously, was his first grandchild, Henry, who has just celebrated his first birthday. So I won't take any more of Dale's time, but it is with great pleasure that I introduce Dale Dougherty.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, got a pastel on. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. You know, I live in, wait a minute, I gotta get off the internet thing here. Okay. I live in Sonoma County, which isn't too far from here, and North Bay and all this. Turn on the mic, okay. We'll get started here. So, is that better? There we go. So I'm really proud to talk to you, and we'll even be talking about some of the things that have been happening in Sonoma County, which whether you're Napa or some other county, I'd love to see replicated where you live. Thank you, Barbara, for the introduction. And she did mention I gave a TED Talk in 2009 in Detroit, of all places. And you might watch it, but the thing that was interesting for me, I had been working on this for several years at this point, and I run into lots of people. In fact, if I ask this group, how many of you see yourselves as makers? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's a pretty good percentage, but there's some of you that didn't raise your hand, and that's why I'm here. Okay? Because making is something we were born with. It's in our brains and it's in our body, it's in our bones. You know, we know how to do this. But we sometimes forget about it. We sometimes don't think of ourselves this way. And what I'm talking about is nothing really earth-shatteringly new. Every culture is a maker culture. Every country, every neighborhood. But we somehow have stopped celebrating it. So what I'm about is thinking that all of us are makers. Because I know there are some of us that are makers. And certainly when I started the magazine, I say, oh, there's lots of, my minimum pitch for what Make Magazine was, it's Martha Stewart for geeks, right? So, but what Martha Stewart does is very maker-oriented. right? But there was a lot of other things, especially involving technology and science, that I thought we could also embrace. Not just cooking and gardening, but gadgets and robots and lots of cool stuff that's out there. So that's what I'm going to cover today. But I want to just sort of personalize this in a way. This is young Quinn Etnier. He lives in Central California near San Luis Obispo. And I'm going to use him as an example more than once here today. But he's 13 years old, but I sort of met him probably when he was a couple years younger than that. His mother noticed he was kind of bored in school. He was just hitting the middle school ages, and he was kind of not too excited to get up in the morning and go to school. She began looking for things that might interest him. And she found our magazine and gave him a copy, and she brought him to Maker Faire. And he started to look around and see things and get really interested. And he started to make things, and the next year he came and exhibited at Maker Faire. And, before long, he created a website called Q Techno, which has products on it, which has a blog, and talks about projects. So he had designed an electronics project and boards at age 13. Now, again, just like I said, we could look at Quinn as exceptional, and he may have great luck and fortune in having parents that are able to connect him with something and help to provide resources for him. But I think in terms of intelligence and ability, he's just like lots of other people. He's just got the opportunity to see himself as a maker and to participate. Now, because he's 13 years old and he thinks what kind of products this world needs, he came up with a fart sensor. Because there are questions. There are too many questions, he says. How bad is it? Does it smell? Do I want to run away? Well, we can develop technology to answer that question. It has to only come from the mind of a 13-year-old boy. But he's been to Maker Faire. He gets ribbons. He's a great young fella. But, he gets invited to teach workshops on Arduino, to adults outside of his county. He does it down in Pasadena. And he's wearing an MIT shirt because maybe he might go there someday. And, I like this. He's on industry panels. He's the little guy all the way in the right. But all these adults talking about things and how they do fancy electronics, and he's there represented. And he was at our Maker Faire Rome last year, and he said, I got to see the Pope and meet the mayor. So he's had quite a wonderful set of experiences that are certainly beyond what he did. But it starts with his own interest in developing this. And by the way, if you're also interested in Quinn, you would know that he's got a Kickstarter going on right now. And as of yesterday, he had raised $39,000. He hopes to get his stretch goal of $50,000. And that's how he's going to pay to develop and market a new product. This kind of stuff wasn't available 10 years ago to people. I had a young woman, a mom wrote me, said, my daughter needed to do a science fair project. She started looking at my copy of Make magazine, and she found a DIY satellite project. That was what she wanted to do. And, I was excited that she found it. I was really happy about what she was wanting to do, but she was a military family. She said we couldn't afford to buy the parts to do that project. And she told her daughter that. And her daughter came back a day later and says, Mom, I want to run a Kickstarter. And Mom said, to herself, I'm not going to say no, don't do it. I'm going to let her do it, but she's probably not going to raise the money she wants, and this will be a good lesson for her, that you don't always get what you dream for. Well, she raised $500 on Kickstarter. She built her science project and did it, But it's that kind of drive to figure it out, do it yourself, that I see here in the maker movement that I want to see in every child, right? It's magic. I believe we're living in a time, it's a kind of renaissance around making. And if renaissance means like a rebirth, but it's really a rediscovery of something. Italian Renaissance was a rediscovery of classical sources of knowledge, like from Greece and Rome, bringing it into a new context. Today, we are seeing a renaissance as kind of a rediscovery of things that we knew how to do 100 years ago. John Dewey comes up with the phrase learn by doing. And we have kind of marginalized that in education. It's not efficient. It's not something you can always do by computers. But it is how we learn. And I think this also something that's kind of happening in this, my observations were early from the adult world, was re-engaging with physical things. In a world that's gone virtual and online and Facebook, people still need to get together physically. They need physical space. They're fascinated by physical things that move and interact with them. And it's also a kind of remix of bringing that physical stuff into the digital world and creating a culture that is kind of something very new, I think. So I got started in this in 2006, I believe, or I sometimes get the year wrong, but as I had this idea that just that we had cooking magazines and gardening magazines and woodworking magazines, we didn't really have kind of a technology magazine that was about projects, about fun things to do. And again, this was targeted at adults. It wasn't targeted at kids. I had no idea that this applied. But the insight I have, which I'll probably repeat several times today, is that I saw adults playing with technology, not using technology, but playing with it, trying to figure out what it does, what it could do for them, and what it could do that maybe it wasn't meant to do. And sometimes we call that hacking. My first idea here was a magazine called Hacks. And my kids said, I don't get what that is. So I came up with a different name. But this project I found was the first one. It just sort of rang my bells. And I thought, this is what I mean. On the cover of the first issue was Chris Benton. He was a professor of architecture at University of California, Berkeley. And he was interested in observing buildings from different heights. On the ground, you're looking kind of straight at a building. From a plane, you might be looking straight down at it. He wondered, what did it look like from this angle? And move it around and look at it at that angle. So he started getting involved in a hobby called Kite aerial photography. And it's to build a rig like the one on the right there. That one's made of popsicle sticks. And put a disposable camera in and raise it into the air with a kite and take a picture of the ground below. And the one that's on the cover has servo motors, and it's a lot fancier. You can control and move the camera and shoot it, take pictures multiple times. But the one we did in the magazine was pretty simple. It was meant to be like something you could do for under $20. And it has the famous, what I call has a ping pong ball there, and it's the silly putty viscous timer, he called it. And he cranks something in a piece in a hole that has silly putty in it, and he has about 90 seconds to get the kite up and take a picture before that silly putty lets go. And once the picture snaps, the ping pong ball falls, and that's how he knows a picture is taken. But it's like a Rube Goldberg contraption, right? But to take a picture. But look at some of the pictures. This is off San Francisco coast. You can kind of see him if you look closely. He's standing on the brown spot, kind of in the middle third of the photo, and you can kind of see a black line going up to the kite. But what started with him as this might be interesting for what I do kind of professionally, actually became an art form for him. And he began to map the coastline and then the bay, looking at particularly salt ponds in the South Bay, and really became a tool for exploring the world around him. But there's something in this project that I think is so human that we just want to get a new perspective on things, and we use a variety of means to do that. So today we'd be using drones often to get kind of the same effect or even a better effect sometimes. But I talked to Chris recently because, drones aren't for me. I've perfected this technique of using kites, and I want to stick with it. So in that first issue, though, I decided we would call our readers makers, and really, I think gave the name to what this has become. That we are, and the core idea is that we're not just consumers of technology or anything, that we make things, we produce things. And that's, I don't care what word we use here, but maker was somehow available as a word that could mean lots of things, or I could roll up lots of things underneath it. If you liked robotics and you liked knitting, I could call you both makers and say, I'd like to introduce the two of you because you're both makers. right? Rather than say, you guys do different things. You have, those are not even related. But maybe, just maybe they are. And I think Emily was here yesterday talking to you. She was on the cover last year. She's a great person who's tried to apply this in extremely difficult circumstances in North Carolina and now in Berkeley. But she's got a great heart and soul in doing that. But the thing I also want to point out, this is not new. This is Popular Mechanics in 1944, 50 cents on the newsstand. And, but it was sort of traditionally male, as the guy is on that cover, and it was a certain kind of person. But there was a spirit in those magazines. When I came up with the idea for Maker, I went back and looked at them, and I said, a generation grew up reading these magazines, and they became scientists and engineers, and it helped them understand, the world around them and to participate in it. And that's what I think we're trying to do. This is Popular Mechanics. On the right are 2 photos from our website, and on the left is, edition of the magazine. We're still building go-karts and things that move, and we're still trying to get them electrically powered, and fathers are still working with sons on projects like this. Although we've never published an article like Scientists on the Brink of Hell. I don't know really, but I'd love to. We actually have published, I found after I found this, we had actually published the Make Your Own Printed Circuits at the bottom. When I saw this after we've been publishing several years, and I said, that sounds kind of familiar. I read this article, and we had actually published the same process, 40 years later, and how to do something. So, but, the core of what I was trying to get at in the magazine was finding things that are fun and cool. Now, if you've ever been to Burning Man, even if you haven't, you probably know that it's dark and it's in the desert and dusty, but you need some way to get around. And because it's dark, if you don't light your bicycle up, you're going to run into someone else and have a terrible accident. And sometimes that's even important in neighborhoods and other things where you want visibility for safety reasons. But a young woman in Vancouver submitted this project. She called it Glow Bikes. And how do you wrap electroluminescent wire around the body of your bicycle? How do you power it and connect it? Now, typically, on the web and other magazines, we say, well, that's kind of cool, and maybe we see a picture of that. What I wanted to do in the magazine is show you how to do it. This is how-to information. And, if you go into libraries still, that area is still heavily used. People want to know, and if you look even on the web, it's sometimes DIY or sometimes how-to. People want to know, how do you do something? So, again, I hope you kind of take some of these into educational framework without me kind of making the obvious connection, but we want to do stuff with what we learn. We don't want to just get knowledge and sit there passively banking it up for some future purpose. But when I say, hey, you want to take your bicycle and make it light up at night? You kind of get kids nodding. And you say, well, it's not easy. That electroluminescent wire doesn't bend so easily, so you kind of have to learn how to hack that. And then you have to make the connections. You have to figure out how much power you need. And it becomes a set of really interesting problems to solve. But you benefit in the end if you get it to work, and even if you don't. What I saw in makers that really sealed for me why I wanted to do this and get involved, I call them enthusiasts. And they're not new as makers being enthusiasts. There's all kinds of enthusiasts around us, whether it's cooking or horseback riding or, But it's people who do something they love to do. And those people inevitably want to share what they do with other people and talk about it because it's their projects. And so I wanted to just create a community for those enthusiasts, and encourage them to share that. So, people ask me, well, how do you define a maker? And I usually say I don't define it as a category. I just define it as this thing that makers create projects, and they share them. And I don't care what that project is. But when you're learning how to do something, you don't have your own project in mind, you're kind of still developing skills. We kind of call that zero to maker. And then once you've kind of got a project in mind, you become a maker. And you can talk to other makers about what you do. And you usually give it a name, just like a pet. It becomes something I'm doing. Fortunately for a lot of people, it's something they're never quite finishing. And they're doing it a long time. This picture here is like, I don't know why these projects come. This is the great delight I've had. These are motorized Adirondack chairs, father and son. Why do people build this? I don't know, but they show up at Maker Faire and they drive them around. But projects are kind of a key thing, and I know we have, I see David here from Project-Based Learning, and we sort of, have that as a common word here. I would say there's some differences here, often in that the projects are initiated by the individual or by a context. This is my project, or I have an idea for a project, and I'd like to kind of make it real. But it still, I think, extends into this project-based learning space of, I'm doing this, and it's meaningful to me, and I'm learning something as a result. But a lot of it, I just simply want it to be fun and engaging to start with. I'm supposed to have the word process under there, sorry, I skipped off. Tools and process are part of what we're teaching, how to use a 3D printer, or how to use screwdrivers even. But also, what's really important isn't so much what they produce at this, certainly beginning stages, but what's the process they use? Is it a collaborative process of problem solving? Are they able to kind of follow even the directions that someone else has written in how to do something? Are they coming back to the teacher, okay, I did that, what do I do next? That's not being self-directed as a learner, and that's really our goal around this, is to get kids to be able to explore, engage, and develop on their own. And this is a photo from Casey Shea's class here, and we'll talk about it again, but really a sense of community, that you're all makers and you're sharing what you're doing together, talking about the project, not only doing show and tell of that project, but also really talking about what you learned from doing that. So I want to introduce Maker Faire to you. After I created the magazine, about a year later, had come up with the idea that I was meeting lots of interesting makers, seeing great projects. Could I just bring them together? And we did that in San Mateo, down south of the airport. And in our first year, this year will be our 10th anniversary. You have flyers there. Last year we had 130,000 people at Maker Faire over 2 days. I have to admit it's a little too crowded. But people are so happy, they're willing to put up with parking problems and everything else because they're seeing something they don't get to see every day. And this is why I think it's so fascinating, and this is kind of where I started thinking of education, because we intended the event to be for families, and we saw lots of kids showing up every year, younger kids showing up, and it's like, wow, they see something that's lively, stimulating, interactive, and they want to get involved. And why I'm here talking to you is because you can help them get involved. You can help them become makers. Because it's not clear to me where they go the day after Maker Faire. And they go like, how do I do what that guy did with the giraffe? Or how do I build that kind of boat or that car or robot? We don't have a lot of places in our community to answer that. If their parents know something about this, they can make the connections. But there's so many people that don't really have a clue how to help them. And that's something, in a broad sense, I want to be able to address. Here's a short video of Maker Faire told from the perspective of a drone flying overhead. And this is our Bay Area Maker Faire. That's life-size mousetrap. So I had no idea that we could ever get this many people together to see this kind of stuff. But it says something that it's almost, we need more of this in our lives. And it's been missing. And it's fun and entertaining. It's like reinventing the county fair, but instead of pigs and pies, we have rockets and robots, right? But that's what people are doing today, you know? So, you know, we're beginning to see that people are understanding what Maker Faire is about for fostering innovation and that more and more people create products instead of only consuming them. And this sort of move from consumers to creators is, I think, such a big deal. And just put it in the education context. Are kids consumers of educations? You know, the constructivists said you invent what you learn. You know, it's something that's active. Your mind works that way. But so do your hands, and they're awesomely connected. So in 2014, we had 131 Maker Fairs around the world. We created a program that other people could organize fairs, and our second largest one is in New York City in September, and then had about 85,000 last year. But you know, there's an East Bay Maker Faire in October here. I don't know if Napa has anything. Sonoma County's had one.
Doing one in the museum.
In the museum? Okay, great. May 9th? Fantastic. But you know, it's kind of fun. Last year, we had a Maker Faire at the White House. And now we didn't actually get to hang that banner from the White House, but Photoshop allows us, or allows our community to do things for us that we can't do ourselves. And but you know, we had, so what I love is these backseat, you know, we're moving an electric giraffe onto the White House lawn, and this is what's happening inside the White House. What are they doing? And you know, there's the president with Lindsay Lawler, who created the electric giraffe, and you know, has brought it to Maker Faire every year. And you know, it's just a wonderful, engaging time. You know, and that's the president with the Smithsonian created a 3D printed bust of the president. And you know, it meant a lot, I think, to help get the word out, not just in our country and in places that don't know what the maker movement is, but I'm increasingly learning even in other parts of the world. What I kind of like about Maker Faire are these small vignettes of when I see kids interacting, doing things, making something, having fun, learning to solder, for instance. You know, when Maker Faire opens here in the Bay Area at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and by 10 minutes after 10, I have 75 people waiting in line to learn to solder. Who would have ever thought that? I mean, I'm paying money, and I'm getting the kids, and I'm getting there on a Sunday morning early enough to get in line, wait, and learn to solder. Solder. Soldering. Some of you don't even know what it is, probably. You should come to Maker Faire this Sunday. Get there early. But soldering kind of represents something that's kind of, we haven't been invited to do. And no one said you're a good solderer, but they didn't say you're a bad solderer either. So we can get people in and try something. And this is the spirit of DIY learning, is you can learn almost anything. It doesn't mean you'll be an expert at it. There are people that have done this their whole life. There are people that work in factories doing it. But you can learn something about this, and it makes it accessible. And it begins to improve how you learn about other things, because the next subject is maybe approachable and accessible. This is in Shenzhen, China. What I like to, a lot of effort in this country is around organizing STEM and getting more kids into STEM. And guess what? I don't believe it's working. I don't think we're getting more kids into STEM. I believe the goals are not bad. But I went to this one big kerfuffle at the United Nations about a global STEM crisis. You know, we need more kids in STEM jobs for the future. Corporations are telling us that. Governments are telling us that. And they end up blaming the kids for not taking STEM subjects in school. That's the problem. I think the answer comes more from making. That there's a new freedom to make things. And to make, you use science and technology, but you also use creative subjects. You can learn as much from literature and social science as you can from science and technology. And in fact, the world is about integrating these, more often than just carving them off. So I don't mind people who say, hey, I'm doing a STEM program, we're going to incorporate making, fine, do this. But if you want more kids, a more diverse student group, not just the academic performers into STEM, offer them an opportunity to make. The maker movement is changing how things are made. We have new tools. I mentioned 3D printers, laser cutters, all kinds of things that make it easier for any one of us in this room to make something. Just as personal computers made it easier for you to use a word processor and create a document and print it out, whether a newsletter or a chapter of a book. It's changing where we make things. Right now, we make them in big factories, sometimes offshore. We could make more of these things in our own community. It changes what we make, as I'll give you some examples in a minute, but because we can make one of a thing, instead of needing to make millions of a thing, we can customize and personalize things for health and other kinds of applications. But the thing that excites me the most is who. It is changing who gets to make things. That the requirements, the capital, the facilities are more accessible and affordable than ever. Now, one of the things I want to say, if you let people make things, this is what I see at Maker Faire. Inevitably, they make silly, fun things. And you're going to ask yourself as an educator, is that really important or significant? I think it is. I don't care what people make. Because one of the things that's really driving making is personal expression. I want people to laugh, or this person did, and say this is called disco ducks, and they're little rubber duckies with lights in them that are computer controlled and arrive in a suitcase. This is a large paper mache head. It's this woman's head on someone else. But it delights her. It makes other people laugh. We interact with people. At Maker Faire, you'll see electric cupcakes, a dozen of them. They will even bump into each other. They're silly. In Hanover, Germany, electric hamburgers are the rage. And, this fellow, Michael McCool, has a parrot-like robot on his, on his shoulder. But, many of you have Apple computers. This is what the first silly Apple computer looked like. It's pretty crude. It's pretty rough. It's hand-carved Apple computer in wood. It's a wood case. The electrical socket is borrowed from something else, and the keys are borrowed from something else. But this is so much like a maker. This is the first rough prototype of that idea that was in their head of making a computer for everybody. And Wozniak and Jobs, talked about, going to this homebrew computer club, which is very much a maker-like environment. But, he says, I would do this for free for the rest of my life. Well, he didn't have to, did he? But that's the feeling. That's someone who's speaking that they found something they love to do, and meeting other people who love to do it, boy, it takes you awfully far. There's a phrase that comes from the open source community that I think applies to a lot of makers, and it kind of is like, why did people do these things? And the phrase that Eric Raymond gave was they scratch their own itch. It's something in their head. It's a problem that they see, and they don't know if it matters to anybody else, but they start there, and they want to do something with that. And then when they do it and share it, they find out that other people care, that other people are working on similar things, and you build a community out of that. The other thing I think you learn by making is we all make mistakes. We all fail. It's like being a baseball player. To be a good baseball player, you're failing 2/3 of the time. To be a good inventor and a creator, you have to go through that iterative process and kind of be resilient to failure. Are we teaching that in school? We should. A place in University of SMU in Dallas created a Makerspace, and I kind of asked them what they were doing with this, and it was a design and engineering school, and he said, we wanted to create a safe place for students to fail. We wanted them to do projects and do them on their own and fail at them. And he said, but if we do that in a course and we put a grade on it, they will do the safe thing. They won't try to do the thing that really is ambitious and might fail. So I mentioned this earlier, and I'll kind of go through it quickly, but makers are playing. Their projects become products. The thing that they make gets shown. Deborah here, about 9 weeks after she came across 3D printing, had her own entrepreneurial idea for 3D printers. She would make shoes. She would 3D print shoes. Now, if I show you the shoe, you say, it doesn't look so good. I'm not going to wear that shoe. That's a dumb idea. She had two assumptions. One, the materials and the processes will get better. That shoe will look better over time. But she knew that she could scan your foot and produce a shoe that was the exact match for your foot. That is a new level of shoemaking. We celebrated this recently in a cover of the magazine, but we're seeing people develop their own prosthetics. This is a 3D printed hand with microcontrollers attached to the body. And, someone who lost his hand in an accident and, just didn't find a good fit with, what he got from medical manufacturers. This could be custom built and controlled. It's a whole community of people sharing designs and processes around prosthetics. This gentleman is a doctor, a pediatric surgeon specializing in cardiology. He operates on young children with defective hearts. And he said, as a surgeon, we do all these MRIs and we come up with these scans of a heart. And we have to look at them and figure out how to put that as a 3D model in our head. So when I go in and operate, I know what I'm going to do. And I might have that model in my head, but I can't communicate it to my team, and we can't talk about that. So they took those scans and put it into a 3D model and then 3D printed that heart. Not a generic heart, but the person's heart that they were going to go and operate on. And they could talk about what the strategy was for going in and doing that operation and understanding actually where the defects lie and how they were going to improve that. That's what I mean about things that weren't even possible to imagine doing. So I'm going to go through some ideas I have around making an education, but this is my friend Quinn again. Almost a year ago, I got a call from a superintendent. It happened to be of his school district. And he said, Quinn just came before the school board, and he started telling us all the things that he'd done. He'd built a website, he'd been to Maker Faire, he had products, he knew electronics, he knew all this. The superintendent said, great, Quinn, where did you learn to do all that stuff? And he said, not in school. And the superintendent was smart enough to not like that answer. And Quinn was smart enough to say, maybe I got an opportunity that I would like to share with others. How do we integrate this into our schools so that what I know I could share with my other classmates and that they could have opportunities like I've had? So this is Quinn at the White House. He's gotten everywhere. But, I'm particularly interested in getting the maker movement into schools. As I said, when I see the kids here, I'm particularly fascinated by kids who are non-academic achievers. I think there's great talent in that pool. I think we're underserving them. That's one of the reasons I don't like STEM so much, is often those programs are aimed at identifying the elite performers in school. I want the non-elite. I want the kids that are going to take this on, and we don't know where they're going to go, or whether they go to a four-year college or they simply go out and begin doing things. So, that's kind of what drives me, and some of the work I've done with Casey here. This is a little video. I'm just going to show a minute of it. But when I think of making in schools, it looks like this. The project they're working on is called Squishy Circuits. That's right. So it's Play-Doh. Instead of wires, they're connecting batteries and LEDs and motors and noisemakers into Play-Doh. You make the Play-Doh, one batch with sugar and one with salt. One's a conductor and the other's an insulator. And you build a circuit. The kids can make anything out of that. But it's more important to just, there are teachers in this room, but nobody's teaching them in this traditional sense. They are experimenting and playing. These are fourth graders. But there's a number of things going on there that I won't get, but it's very personal, it's social. It matters that there's two people there, and they're kind of playing off each other. They're not like, don't look at each other's work. They're actually learning from each other, and the joy that they have in discovering new things. It's the simplest thing to build a circuit and light a light, but you see a kid do it for the first time, and what do they do it again? And they do it like, did that really light up? Did that really light up? Did that light up? Well, I'm going to do it again and again and again. And there's something about that pattern that just repeats universally. I kind of say blinky lights are our gateway drug to making. When we get to do that, they begin to do that. So, last thing, I have believed that the best way to get this into education is the creation of space, not curriculum. It is develop space. I was talking to Kim that's over here, is a kindergarten teacher. She's talking about using blocks with kids. I go, that's making. They build a city out of blocks, build a firehouse, build a hotel. That's making, But unfortunately, hit middle school, we don't do those things anymore. I want to see us create spaces that could combine the art studio, the computer lab, the biology lab, anything else that is more a workshop, a place to go do things. Any teacher could use it. Any class could be taught in it. We're seeing makerspaces that are freestanding inside of science centers. We have, let me just kind of go, we have a playbook on spaces.makerspace.com that sort of goes through some of the modules. If you are looking at doing that, just search for it or use that URL. You could have a textiles area with sewing machines, and somebody might say, yeah, that's old home ec, but this is a new version of that. I mean, we have one of the big problems with a lot of this is it has been sort of gender stereotyped over time, and there's such a great opportunity to reintegrate that. I mean, we see people using sewing machines to build sails and, kites and lots of things, and do your clothes. Casey here started Project Make at Annalee High School. Originally it was in our office, and then we got back the old shop class at Annalee. And it's just been marvelous to see this kind of open-ended class. We teach some basic skills, but kids get to make things. And Casey has discovered so many things and has run with this. I'd say that the one thing I learned from this is you need a champion. You need someone in your school that really wants to do this and really cares about the kids, cares about the processes. And, sadly, they're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting because there's just not a easy path to do this. It's getting easier, but it's not there. I'm going to skip that. This I do want to show you. This is, I'm really proud of because we have a program we do in the summer called Maker Camp, and it's an online summer camp. And if you're looking for a place to start making and have very few obstacles, try summer. Try doing a multi-week program in summer, especially for the kids that don't have a lot of things going on during the summer. And these are the kids, this one is at Comstock, and then this is Pioneer Olivet. But at Comstock, the key was actually bringing teachers in to the Maker Camp, getting the teachers involved, because two things happened. One was actually the students get to see the teachers in a different role, which was nice. But the teachers are teaching making, and that's almost like this great idea. It's like professional development, right? Because they begin to see how it works with kids, and then during the school year, they begin to integrate it, and kids come back and ask for it. But watch, I'm going to just show a minute of this. It's on our website on makercamp.com, but I think it's just, I did not produce it, but if I had, I would have written exactly this script. They had a duct tape fashion show. Is that marvelous?
Building something that puts your mind set on it, and and you try not to give up. That's what it's like about being a maker. My favorite part of Maker Camp is learning how to make all these new stuff. You made some cool stuff so far. When you can learn that, you can create a really good thing. It's really fun being a maker, and maybe when you get older, you could make something that nobody's ever thought of before. I thought making stuff was pretty much hard when I kind of first started, but actually it turns out to be fun because the ideas you get might be kind of excitement you feel when something is pretty cool.
So I don't watch all. It's just, it's hearing the kids in their own voice talk about what this means to them and how they see themselves. We use this word, sometimes it sounds highfalutin, but agency. The kids are driving this experience, and the benefits are that it means something to them. I'm not going to show this. There's a great one at elementary school. But another thing that's happened in Sonoma County is Sonoma State University has created a Maker Certificate program. And Casey and others are involved in that. Both work in like a Makerspace, showing how to organize that. But Jessica Parker runs it at the Department of Education there. They just finished one semester of doing that. It was really successful. I think it's going to spread throughout the state, and I'm really happy to see that happening. Oh, yeah, we're going to go on that. I'm going to skip ahead here because I want to leave a few time for questions. One of the questions I got early on was the assessment question. How do we measure this, and how do we, test to see if it's happening? And it really used to it does bother me because I think it's the wrong question in ways. But it was almost like a shower thought. I was brainstorming out this, and I really, what I believe is that making creates evidence of learning. That the evidence is in the things you make, in the kids themselves, and in what they're doing. And to some degree, we have to curate that and collect it and present it. We're working on an open portfolios project. I started a nonprofit called the Maker Education Initiative, makered.org, which has resources for teachers and others there. But a lot of the assessment, I think, if you go to art school, they ask for your portfolio. Go to engineering school, they ask for your test scores. But that might be changing. MIT announced a year and a half ago that students could submit maker portfolios to MIT as a supplement. The projects they bring to Maker Faire, the projects they do in the science fair, the projects they do on their own, which is a really big deal, can be submitted just as if you were an artist or a musician. So we're seeing that kind of change happening. And again, I'd love you to think about that this isn't about robots. This isn't about 3D printers. It's about creating this mindset of being a maker. Hearing those kids talk about it, it is a disposition, an attitude that I think makes their life better, changes their own life. Ooh, changes the screen here. Okay, so I guess I got one. I'm going to skip over some of this. But what you can do is organize a makerspace, create programs like Project Make, use summer camp, host a school or district Maker Faire, and develop a community of practice, among teachers. And I would argue, don't go for professional development, go for amateur development. Okay? Have people work among themselves and talk to each other and collaborate and share what they're learning. Allow it to emerge. Don't come in and make it a cookie cutter thing. So this is in Sacramento once in a bulletin board, I saw this quote and I just loved it. I actually didn't know who it was from, and I'll put that to you to see if you can come up with it. But it says, life can be much broader once you discover that everything around you is made by people no smarter than you. Can we say that to kids? Could we tell them that? You know, there weren't just geniuses that built the things around you. There were people just like you, and you can do that. That's what we want to get across to kids, that to participate today is meaningful, that they're learning things that they can do to change the world around them. So finally, I'd love you to join us. Become a maker. Help us spread making in the world. Join our movement and make the change. Thank you. So, Jill, and I'll also hang around a bit if you want personal questions or something. Anybody have a question? Come on. Come on, you know how it is in class when students don't have questions. Come on.
Where's the location of this?
This is down in San Mateo. It's just it's almost right at the intersection of 92 and 280 and 101.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that 130,000 or so attend.
Yeah.
How many of those are young people?
Well, I don't exactly have a breakout of it, but they're families. So, you know, I would, you know, and sometimes there's family tickets, so we don't always know exactly how many come in on that. But, you know, it's the makers tell me, I had no idea there were so many kids at, you know, at this event. Because a lot of technology events are really geared, you know, for professionally or business, and they don't have kids there. But I'd say if you have, even if you're sitting on the fence about this, I think if you go to Maker Faire, and I've heard this from teachers and others, you know, that I went to the fair, it blew my mind, and I came back and I you know, sat down and tried to figure out how to do this every day. Stephen?
Hey, Gail, I think when we put on a mini Maker Faire for
Yeah.
several years and continue with other folks, it was amazing how many makers we found that
Yeah.
would love to come to that kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
So creating even a small one in your own community.
Yeah.
Can work.
And it's even meaningful among your parents. That they all, you know, part of this is we all have DIY skills. They don't always fit into the formal academic curriculum that we have, but they are life skills and they are meaningful skills. And, you know, there's so many, you know, just to appreciate people for what they can do and to, you know, connect kids to that is a big deal. But, you know, that's also a good point, because doing a Maker Faire is how you meet some of the smart people in your community that you can bring back into class and say, hey, will you teach Arduino to the kids, or will you help us with that? Also, it's a great way to get equipment donation. With some of the things that Casey did was have open houses. People show up and they go, you know, in my garage I have this thing that I don't need anymore. Would you guys like it? So don't go out and buy new equipment. It's around in the garages and basements of your folks. Yeah.
You said something like, and I don't know if I'll get this quite right, but something like with respect to making, if you put a grade on it, students will do the safe thing. And I think that has implications for learning in general.
Yeah.
I wonder if you would like to say any more about
Well,
assessment.
you know, I think this is, I think one of the trends here is that you actually want to, formal learning needs to learn from and borrow from informal learning. And we have this sort of sad divide between the two. It's like after school or summer camp. And we often, the formal learning part of a school doesn't know really what the kids do over there. So one of the things that I love to hear at the maker camps is a principal come and point to kids and see that kid. That kid was our biggest problem child all year long. She's the star of Maker Camp. You know, so if she's not there to observe that and bring that into the school year, those are kind of just split identities. To kind of, how do we bring them together? And I think some of the answer is I think you can still teach, I think, making and you know, give grades and things if you have to, but there's also the opportunity to have it for enrichment or have it as outside of the school thing, and to find other ways to recognize and validate the experiences that kids have there. And I think that's what kind of Maker Faire is meant to be. We often call it an exhibition, not a competition, which I think is a really good, I don't want kids saying, hey, this is better than that, or you're number 2. It's like, hey, someone is bound to like something that you're doing and interact with you. So that's all I mean. I think, in the traditional sense is you might grade effort and you might grade, engagement and their ability to do things. Don't grade the project so much, that could be a freeing way of looking at it. But I think it's also incorporating things like, when you have them tell the narrative of how they made something, ask the question, did you fail at something that, caused you to learn? Right? Don't just tell that really good hero story where the first idea that came out of your head was what you did and it was magic.
I just wanted to say thank you. I've been 3 times and I've never seen kids so engaged. And I really think it's redefining our definition of smart.
Yeah.
And when you talked about how they're explaining, it's really Common Core explaining their thinking.
Yeah. Well, I think that's some of what you guys can do is translate how this fits into your context. I'm glad to hear you say that. I think engagement is the big thing. And I say, going back to that formal, informal. It's summer camp. We don't want kids to be bored, right? We have activities. We have things that we say, here's 3 things you could do today. And we don't want you to just sit. What if school was like that? What if we said, boredom is not an acceptable condition in this school? It would change how we teach and how we learn. Let's see. Any other question? Just one other thought, but it escaped me. Yes.
I want to say I've been 3 times as well, and we brought the squishy circuits to our school.
Yeah.
That one intercession break, the kids loved it.
Yeah.
Just trying to find ways of incorporating.
Right.
From today's activity, I'm thinking if I could set up a room with just materials.
Exactly. And it can be the cheapest materials you could find. This one, I didn't show you this video, but this one principal from elementary school heard me talk. She said, I'm going to go and create a makerspace in our school. And she sent a letter home to the kids and said, take a Ziploc bag, put anything in it and send it to school, and we'll make stuff with that. And that's how she jump-started her makerspace. And she got them in, they sorted it, and really, kids are geniuses with just common materials. That's part of why I don't mind the technology, it's wonderful, but we don't need to start with getting all of that. In fact, it's actually good for them to build up those skills. I'm going to leave you with one last thought. The thing that I find remarkable here is this really is a movement that's coming really from the bottom up. It's from individual teachers and districts and schools deciding to do something on some scale. And no matter how small, it's meaningful. Starting with a maker camp, starting with a space. Every one of them, I've seen them grow. More things happen. When you have that space, more people come in and say, what do you do in that space? Well, here's what we do. And they can see it for themselves. If it was curriculum, you'd be passing them papers, and they'd look at it, I got plenty to read. So, the experience even validates itself to parents and administrators and other people. And, so many things in education are kind of being pushed from the top down today. There's something really special about this coming up and emerging from people. And the happiest thing a teacher could say to me is that I've heard is, this is why I got into teaching, to do creative things, to do, engage kids in this way. So thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate your time and